You may talk to some Christians and they're very quick to be like, that stuff doesn't work, manifestation doesn't work, law of attraction isn't real. What they're actually missing is that these things do work. Manifestation does work. Law of attraction does work. What it also does oftentimes is it excludes the will of God from the will of self. The issue is manifestation doesn't ask the question, what is God's will for my life and how do I align my intentions with that? It asks the question, what do I desire for myself and how do I align my intentions with that? I've seen examples of it time and time again where the very thing that you think will satisfy your flesh is the same thing that can destroy your soul. What am I alive for? What purpose do I serve outside of my own personal ambition? What was I created to do? Welcome to A Time to Speak, episode 1. I am your host, Jonna Nichelle Wilkes, and I am still trying to wrap my head around the fact that we are finally here. It is a new season, it's a new year, and I am so excited to be on this journey with you. If you know me, you know that I love to dive deep on so many different issues, whether it is tough topics to tackle in the Christian faith, whether it's cultural and political dialogue that challenges mainstream conversations, whether it is conversations around our roles as women and men in today's world and what it looks like to live that out according to God's call for our lives, or whether it is challenging the narratives that we have been fed around health, wellness, education, mental health. The list goes on and on. I love to hear different perspectives, have thoughtful conversations, and really challenge ideas that we may sometimes be very quick to adapt as truth. And I've been doing that in a private setting for many years now, and I'm really excited to be having these conversations here with you. A Time to Speak is a podcast where we will be exploring the intersections of faith, culture, wellness, personal development, all from a biblical foundation. And it is my goal that this would not just be another podcast sharing my opinions and what I think in hopes to get you to think or live or behave the way that I do, but I really hope we can spark conversations that encourage us all to think outside of the box, to ask the hard questions, to do the inner work, and to do our best to live out God's call for each and every one of us, no matter what that looks like. With that being said, I want to give you a little bit of background on who I am, why I chose to start this podcast now, and then we are going to dive right into today's topic. We have a lot to unpack and I want to get into it. But first, I am a wife. I am the mom of the sweetest 2-year-old little boy with another little boy on the way. Very pregnant as we are recording episode 1, but so excited to continue growing our family. I also run a digital brand agency, and one thing that I'm really passionate about is just sharing what the journey looks like, being in the in-between of running a business, being a content creator, being a mom, being a wife. You know, I think a lot of times we kind of see life through these extremes, right? We've got the women who are climbing the corporate ladder and doing all of the things in business, and then we've got the amazing homemakers and the stay-at-home moms and the ones that homeschool and do all of the things. And I have really found myself somewhere in the middle of all of that. And I love sharing what that journey looks like because I think there's a lot of us that find ourselves a little bit more in the middle than on those extremes. So a big part of my journey is sharing that online. I have been a Christian content creator for several years now, and I really just love getting to connect with other people where they're at in their journey. I, for one, do not have this straight and narrow journey of what my walk with the Lord has looked like. It has been a road full of plenty of twists and turns and bumps and everything in between. And we will definitely get into that in later episodes. But I really love getting to connect with people where they're at, to encourage them and really just to walk along this life together. This podcast is something that's been on my heart for a really long time now, but I firmly believe that without God's approval, without His call, without without him saying, you have the green light to do this, then we can have as many personal ambitions as we want. We can have as many big goals as we want, but it all becomes background noise at the end of the day when we're not in alignment with his will. And so this podcast for me was the culmination of so much prayer, so much seeking the Lord, and really searching my own heart, because for a long time, I was so consumed by what people were going to think about the things that I had to say, how people were going to perceive me, that I wouldn't have even been fully able to come and to share what I want to share and how I feel called to share it. And so I truly feel that the time is now. It is a time to speak, hence our podcast name. And with that being said, let's dive right into today's topic. Today's topic is all around how to transform your life from the inside out and show up as the person that you are called to be in this year. I know in the first month of the year and even in the last half of December, we tend to do a lot of reflection. We're making our vision boards, we're setting goals for ourselves. And while all of those things are great things, there's nothing wrong with any of those. I want to get very clear on what it means to show up as the person that we're called to be. A lot of us tend to set these big goals at the beginning of the year, and then by the end of the year, we're wondering why we didn't see them come to fruition. You know, we made the vision board, we tried to manifest, we tried to pray, we did all the things, and yet the goals still didn't come to pass. And I think that's because we actually miss a lot of key foundational issues. And this is not just something that applies to the new year either. This is something that I would actually encourage us all to do on a very regular basis, whether that is once a quarter, whether that is twice a year, whatever that looks like for you. What we're going to talk about today and how to show up as how we're called to show up and how to transform our lives from the inside out. This is not just a one and done thing. This is very much a rinse, repeat process, and one that I think we could all benefit from. All right, so let's get into it. What does it actually look like to transform your life from the inside out? What does it actually look like to show up as the person you're called to be? Not just someone who sets these big goals, but somebody who actually executes, somebody who actually does what is needed to move the needle forward in their life. There have been a couple of things that I have personally put into place and have changed the game for me. And so I really want to share those things with you today. The first one being get rooted. Get rooted. What do I mean by get rooted? I'm so glad that you asked. Getting rooted to me means going beyond the surface level goal setting, vision casting, and really taking a look at our personal identity and being rooted in who God has called us to be. You know, I think we actually have to ask ourselves these questions that sometimes may seem almost existential, right? What am I alive for? What purpose do I serve outside of my own personal ambition that serves the world? You know, what was I created to do? These things can feel really overwhelming, and I don't think they necessarily have to be. I know they sound like these really big picture ideas, and it is important for us to dig deep and to do that internal reflection. But before we go forth and before we start trying to execute, I want us to know who we are. I want us to know whose we are. And I want us all to know what purpose we serve that is bigger than just ourselves, bigger than just making a certain amount of money, bigger than just going to the gym a certain amount of times every week, bigger than just the external surface level goals. I think for a lot of us, there is a major disconnect between our ambition and our identity. And I think that disconnect exists when we're looking at life from the outside in. We're looking at the external factors that can sway our decisions one way or the other, rather than having a rooted sense of identity and letting everything that we do flow from that place. And so what I mean by that is it is so easy to look at everything that is going on in the world. You know, we have access to mass information at our fingertips. things that we did not have years ago. We have access to know what everyone's doing and when they're doing it and who's crushing their goals. And what we don't actually realize on a subconscious level, that a lot of times our behaviors are flowing from that place. We're feeling the external pressures of the world. We're seeing what's going on in the economy. We're seeing what's going on in other places. We're seeing how things are unfolding, how agendas are coming to the light, and we're allowing those external things to drive our behavior forward, as opposed to being rooted and knowing who we are, knowing what God has called us to do, which would then allow us to go forth and tackle our goals without being swayed by what else is happening in the world or in the lives of the people around us. So, what does it actually look like to get rooted? A question that I think we could all ask ourselves is, how do my goals align with God's will? And do my goals align with God's will for my life? You know, we are in a day and age where we often hear these messages about manifestation and law of attraction. And you may talk to some Christians and they're very quick to be like, that stuff doesn't work. Manifestation doesn't work. Law of attraction isn't real. And what they're actually missing is that these things do work. Manifestation does work. Law of attraction does work. What it also does oftentimes is it excludes the will of God from the will of self. The issue is manifestation doesn't ask the question, what is God's will for my life and how do I align my intentions with that? It asks the question, what do I desire for myself and how do I align my intentions with that? And that can be extremely dangerous territory, because I have seen this in my own personal life, and I have seen examples of it time and time again, where the very thing that you think will satisfy your flesh is the same thing that can destroy your soul. And so I think when we talk about being rooted, I'm talking about living for something outside of yourself, which first starts with your relationship with your creator. Now, you may be listening to this and there may be a couple of different perspectives. There may be the perspective of, well, I don't really have that relationship. So what does that even look like to get to know God or to become rooted in God when I don't even really have that personal relationship? And then there may be the perspective of, well, I do have that personal relationship, but I want to make sure that I am rooted in his will. And so how do I do that? And I want to very quickly just speak to both of those things. If you are one listening to this and you're like, that all sounds great. I've been going through my life. I've been setting these goals and I've been wondering why things haven't come together the way that I envision them coming together. I want to know God. I want to understand how to have a rooted identity. I would say start by prioritizing prayer, by getting to know him and opening yourself up to a relationship with the Lord. This does not have to be overly complicated. This can be as simple as, God, I want to know you better. I want to know not just who I am by the world's standards, but by your standards. I want to know your character. I want to know your heart. I want to know your will for my life. Show me who you are. And from there, I would begin digging into his word. Read through the Gospels, read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, learn about the life and the story and the history of Jesus, because I truly believe that is the starting point for forming an identity and setting goals that will change your life from the inside out. Now, if you're listening to this and you're saying, Jonna, I know the Lord, I have an identity in Christ, but I want to make sure that I am remaining rooted, I would say to cross-reference your goals with his word. I'll give you an example of what that looks like in my own life. So this year, I have a goal to exceed my business revenue. I want to grow my business. I want to continue growing my team, and I really want to steward it well. Okay, so what does it look like to make sure that that goal is not out of selfish ambition, but is actually aligned with the will of God? So for me, I can take that goal back to scripture. For this example, we're going to look at Proverbs 31. I know a lot of us have heard about what it looks like to be a Proverbs 31 woman, or we talk about the Proverbs 31 woman. And so I want to look at some specific scriptures from this chapter in Proverbs. The first one being, she rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household, meaning she is a hard worker. It goes on to say, she considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. Verse 18 says, she perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. And then later on, it goes to say, she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. So what does that mean as it relates to my goals? That means when I am looking at a biblical model of the woman who I want to be, who I want to embody, I'm looking at a woman who was a businesswoman. She took care of her business and she took care of her household. And let me tell you, I'm trying to be a woman about my business and about my home. That is something that I touched on earlier that I am so passionate about. So for me, the goal of exceeding business revenue and taking my business to new heights is in alignment with what I believe is God's will for my life, to be a woman who works hard, to be a woman whose children rise up and call her blessed, to be a woman who wakes up early, who can put her hands to the plow, who can sell merchandise, or in this case, business services, but you get what I'm saying. So I think for us as believers, it is so important to be able to look at our goals and ask ourselves, where is this goal coming from? And does it align with God's will for my life? All right. So first things first, we are getting rooted in 2025. We are not just out here setting goals with the wind. We are getting rooted in our identity and we are allowing our goals to flow from that place. Okay? Okay. The second thing that we are doing in 2025 is we are getting granular. We are getting rooted and then we are getting granular. And what I mean by getting granular is that while I love a good prayer board, vision board, I love setting big goals and I love being able to see these things, if we do not get specific, then a lot of times we don't see that vision come to fruition. Now, there's a couple of ways that I do this in my own personal life, so I will share that with you. Take what works, leave what doesn't, but whatever you do, please get granular with your goals. The first thing that I do when it comes to getting granular, and I do this on a regular basis, is taking inventory of my life. Actually looking at the year that just passed and asking myself, what worked out for me? What didn't work? What were some goals that I set last year that I didn't accomplish? What are some goals that I did accomplish? What differentiated the things that I accomplished from the things that I didn't? It's really taking this bird's eye perspective of your own life and asking yourself, what is working here and what is not working here? And the reason that I love to take inventory before I even get really granular and set the goals is because when you take inventory of your life, you're able to see not just what you need to add to your life, but what you might actually need to remove from your life in order to get where you want to go. So for me, taking inventory kind of looks like categorizing my life into different buckets. And I do this with setting goals too. So for me, those buckets look like marriage, home, motherhood, finances, faith, friendships, personal development, health and wellness. These may look different for you, but those are some of the categories of my life. And when I look at these categories, I ask myself, okay, what did I do that worked in each one of these areas in years past? Let's say that a goal of mine for last year was to cultivate community. Well, what does that look like now that it's been a year? What do my friendships look like? What type of friend was I? What are ways in which I can improve as a friend? And what are ways in which I feel like I really won as a friend and did well as a friend? There are so many times where we just jump into goal setting and we neglect taking inventory of our life. And so we end up trying to add on all of these things. You know, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to start a business venture. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And if we were to take inventory of our life, we would actually have a much better understanding of what we have capacity for, of what we do really well, and what areas that we really may need to improve or develop a little bit more in order to reach the goals that we want to reach. Once you have taken inventory of your life, you've taken inventory of your relationships, you've taken inventory of your finances, you've taken inventory of all of the different buckets of your life, what I like to do is I like to get out a pen and paper and I like to do one big brain dump. Before I get the granular goals out and into motion, I like to do a large brain dump of everything that I want to see happen in each one of those goals. Maybe I want to cook more of my meals at home. Maybe I want to eliminate toxic products in my household. Maybe I want to level up as a wife and pour more into my marriage. I'm just going to brain dump every single one of these things in their different categories. And then, and this is the most important part of the brain dump, after I brain dump all of these different ideas, these thoughts, these goals, I'm going to look at each one of them and I'm going to ask myself the question, why? If I want to make 80% of my meals at home in this next year, I'm going to ask myself the question, why? Why do I want to make 80% of my meals at home? Well, maybe the answer to that question is I want to live a healthier lifestyle. Then I would ask myself, why? Why do you want to live a healthier lifestyle? Well, I personally want to live a healthier lifestyle so that I can show up for myself, for my family, for my business, the way that I feel called to show up. I want to be a good steward of my body. The reason that I keep asking myself this question, why, is because I'm trying to get to the root of the identity that aligns with the goal that I'm setting. So instead of saying, I want to go to the gym 4 times a week, I'm saying, no, I want to embody the identity of this type of person. And this type of person invests into her health. What that could look like as a very specific goal is going to the gym 4 times a week. It's also important to ask ourselves these questions because sometimes our goals actually end up shifting when we get to the root of the why. Let me give you an example of that. I've talked to so many people over the years that will say things like, Jonna, I really want to start a business. And when I ask why, they say, well, I want more time with my family. I want time freedom. I really don't want to be at a 9 to 5, sitting at a desk all day, right? So I just know I want to start a business. The reality of all of those things is that actually doesn't mean that you want a business. It may mean that you want a change in the career that you have. It may mean you want to pivot in the way that you've structured your life. In fact, if you actually ask a lot of these business owners, they will tell you, well, yes, you do have more ownership around how you structure your time. You do not have the time freedom that you might think you have. In fact, a lot of small business owners, people in entrepreneurship, especially in those early years, they are some of the hardest working people that you will find. They work the longest hours. They are pouring themselves into this vision because of the life that they want to live as a result of it. So if you're just looking for the time freedom and you're just looking to not be at a 9 to 5 at a desk in a cubicle, there may be other ways of going around that. Versus if you were to tell me, well, I want to start a business because I see a gap in this area. I see a problem and I have an idea. I have a solution. I see how my solution is going to impact the lives of others and I want to bring it forth. Then I might say, yeah, you have a business. You've got a business idea. It's not just this idea of, oh, I want more time freedom. I use this example because there are many times that we set goals and the goals themselves are great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with them. But when we get to the deeper why beneath the goal, we realize, well, my goal isn't necessarily to launch a business. My goal is just to have more time with my family. And that really may change how we go about executing. So getting granular is so key to setting goals and actually seeing them come to fruition in our life. So I start out with the brain dump. After I get through the brain dump, I ask myself why. And I ask myself why as many times as I need to get to the root of the identity that aligns with the goal. So if you're like, how many times do I have to keep asking myself? Ask yourself why until you get to the root of the goal and the motive and the intention behind it. This is how you can ensure that you aren't just setting goals based on external things, based on other people, based on the world around us, but really based on who you're called to be and how you're called to serve the world around you. It becomes a conversation that's so much bigger than just what I want and milestones I want to achieve. And it becomes a conversation on how do I want to impact the world around me? How do I want to better serve my family? How do I want to show up for the people in my circle? How do I want to show up for my friends? And how do I set goals that align with those things? So get rooted and get granular. Now, once you've gotten rooted and you've gotten granular, the last and one of the most important takeaways from this conversation is get confident. Get confident. Let me be clear on what I mean and what I don't mean when I say get confident. What I don't mean by confidence is having overconfidence in yourself alone outside of God's guidance, okay? I'm not talking about a false sense of confidence. I'm not talking about faking it till you make it. I am talking about confidence that comes from trusting yourself, from keeping the promises that you make to yourself, from telling yourself, I'm going to do something, and then actually acting on that thing and doing it. That is what I mean by get confident. And I think it starts with a very simple question. Do I trust myself? Do I actually follow through with the promises that I say I'm going to make? And I don't care how big the promise is or how small the promise is. That's actually not what's relevant. The relevancy is, do I follow through? So let me give you an example in my own life. I wake up, I say, you know what? I really want to make a nice meal at home for my family tonight. I am going to cook dinner at home for my family. The end of the day rolls around. My toddler's acting wild. I feel super tired. I'm pregnant. I just want to lay down. I really don't feel like I have it in me. You know what? It's not that big of a deal. Let me just hit up Uber Eats. Let me hit up DoorDash and let me just get some sushi for dinner. Seemingly, not that big of a deal, right? I can make dinner tomorrow. It's okay. I have grace for myself. I can say all of the things, but what I'm actually saying to myself is, I don't trust that I'm going to follow through on the thing that I said I would do. And while this may not seem like that big of a deal, and on the surface, it's really not that big of a deal, what it does is it reinforces this subconscious thought that I am not trustworthy with my own word. And that is a killer of confidence. There's a quote that I love, and this quote says, lack of confidence kills more dreams than lack of ability. This is a James Clear quote, and he speaks so well on confidence and also on goal setting and creating habits in the book Atomic Habits. If you have not read that, I highly recommend. It is a book that you can read again and again and again and keep coming back to key takeaways around the very topic that we're discussing today. But the quote is, lack of confidence kills more dreams than lack of ability. So what does he mean by that? A lot of times it's not my ability to do the thing that I said I was going to do. It's my lack of confidence. I don't actually trust myself to do it. And once you've broken your word so many times, it really stops having that much meaning. So how do you actually go about building that confidence? Well, you start by keeping the promises that you make to yourself. And it sounds simple because it is, but simple doesn't equate to easy. A lot of times the simple thing to do is actually the hard thing to do because it requires discipline, it requires obedience, it requires consistency. And while those are very simple, you either do it or you don't do it, it's not always easy. And so when you're setting goals for yourself, I want you to think, what have I been doing? What does my track record show? And how do I set goals that are actually achievable? So instead of telling myself, I'm going to read 30 books a year when I've literally never finished a book in my life. Instead, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to read one book in the first quarter, and I'm going to break that down into different chapters that I'm going to tackle from day to day. So while that may seem almost too easy, the point isn't about how difficult the thing is. The point is that you are setting a goal for yourself that you know you are capable and going to actually see through. And in doing so, you build the confidence that you need to then conquer a bigger goal, a bigger milestone. This is something that is so crucial, and it ties so closely into our identity, because if we aren't confident, if we're not confidently rooted in who God has created us to be, how can we go forth and accomplish these big dreams and these big ambitions? I'm not saying that you can't, but I'm saying it's a lot easier to waver, and it's a lot easier to fall off, and it's a lot easier to be that person that sets all the goals in January, and by April you're like, yeah, I was being a little ambitious, and I'm going to kind of take a step back, or you just kind of fall off. That is not the person that we want to be. When you want to transform your life truly from the inside out, you're going to take a hard look at who you've been leading up to this point. You are going to take inventory. You are going to get granular, and you are going to follow through. You are going to do the things that you tell yourself that you are going to do. And might I add, you are going to surround yourself with other people that do the same, people that are embodying the traits that we want to embody. So I would be remiss if I ended this episode without saying, as you are taking inventory of your life and you're taking inventory of your circle, I want you to look at what the people around you are doing. You know what they say, birds of a feather flock together, and as cliche as it sounds, it is the truth. When I look at my circle and I look at my friends, I want to be inspired. I want to be challenged to be a better version of myself. I want to look at my circle and say, I need to level up in this area because I am surrounded by winners. So taking inventory is not just taking inventory of your own life, it's taking inventory of your circle, because our environment matters a lot when it comes to the goals that we have and actually executing them. So don't just take inventory of your life, take inventory of your circle, take inventory of your surroundings, take inventory of your habits, and ask yourself, do these things add to the person that I want to be, or do these things take away from the person that I want to be? You know, at the beginning of last year, I made a commitment with a couple of friends of mine to give up alcohol for the entire year of 2024. And then I got pregnant at the end of 2024. So that's just going to be a rolling goal that takes us into 2025, I guess. But I say that to say, when I set that goal, I had done that out of taking inventory of how alcohol served or did not serve a purpose in my life. And when I got really honest with myself, I looked at my life and I thought, you know what? This really isn't serving me. And I want to prove to myself that I don't need this. I don't need this to function in my life. I don't need this to have a good time. I don't need this to add to my relationships. I only want to do what is serving me. And while I made a year-long commitment, that's not to say that I would never touch a sip of alcohol again. I did that to show myself that I could, one, follow through with what I said I was going to do, and two, make sure that my identity was rooted and I was not relying on any external thing, substance, person, whatever it may to be who God has called me to be. So get rooted, get granular, and get confident. I promise you will watch your life transform from the inside out. I hope that this episode was helpful. I hope that you have some takeaways. I would love to hear some of the things that you're doing differently, some of the things that you're adding or removing from your own life in the new year. I want us to win, and I want us to win together. If this episode has brought any value to you, if it's encouraged you in any way, I would love to hear your takeaways. I would love for you to leave a 5-star review. It helps so much, especially as we are just getting started. But I'm so excited to be along this journey with you, and I can't wait for the next episode. I'll see you next time.